'Cause he gets up in the morning, then he goes to work at 9, then he comes back home at 5:30, gets the same train every time. 'Cause his world is built on punctuality, it never fails. And he's all so good, and he's all so fine, and he's all so healthy in his body and his mind.
I'm a well-respected man about town, and I'm doing the best things so conservatively. That's right, welcome back to the Conservative Underground. Today's show is brought to you by the number 10, as in 10%. What is 10%? Well, it's the tip of the iceberg. The tip of all the icebergs that are just about as plentiful as they were back in 1979 when satellite monitoring of icebergs began. And now, just as then, we see only about 10% bobbing above the surface. But don't be fooled, 10% is a lot. Today, in the Conservative Underground, we're exploring just what 10% is and what 10% can do. Big number. Our U.S. jobless rate has been hovering around 10%. What else is 10%? Tithing. Now there's a word. There's certain words in the English language that act as red flags, automatically telling people in the know what culture you're in. Businessmen source people instead of contacting them. Folks in certain parts of the West drink pop instead of soda. And if you use the word tithe, odds are good that you have a strong Judeo-Christian background. But then I probably didn't need to tell you that. 10%'s a big number, which is why I was so upset to hear the Obama announce a 10% penalty on charitable donations. How can you conscionably undercut charitable donations in a time when so many need the services of the Salvation Armies and the food pantries, who are all making drastic cutbacks right now? You talk about lowering the tax write-off. Only 10%. Within my American culture, the understood tithe, the understood social donation, the understood charitable donation to charities is 10% of your income. 10%'s a big number. Limiting tax write-offs and charitable giving limits the cash that's available to be given. The Obama, of course, proposes to redistribute that money through government programming. Now tell me, how does sending my money to be whittled away by the government operational costs benefit the needy, who will then get only a fraction of the original donation I was willing to make? But then I remembered where the tithing culture of charitable donations lives in America. It lives in the religious right. Oh, that's right. I said it. The religious right. That's me. And I'm proud of it. Polls show that across the country, folks who count themselves on the right side of the aisle give more than their counterparts on the left. Remember the numbers on what the Obama has been known to tithe? It's like 1% of his income. Now, normally I would take the hard line that what his left hand does with his tithes shouldn't be known by his right hand, much less by me. But he's attacking tithing right now, and this information happened to be supplied for me to use. Given the source of the attack, it makes sense. If the right gives of its own accord to valued social services, and the icon of the left gives so little to charity, then it only stands to reason that the left would assume that charitable donations can do nothing because they're so small, because their own donations are so small. It must follow that everyone gives so little that is, without being compelled by the government. You see, because liberals tend to have a narrowly greedy and lazy worldview that says, I'm not going to help those people, but someone really should help those people. If there was only a law to make someone else help them. The other day I mentioned there will be blood, and I have to admit that until recently, the modern-day parallels were lost on me. China, ladies and gentlemen, is the Daniel Day-Lewis character from There Will Be Blood, establishing itself in places that are fiscally poor but rich in what can be extracted from the earth. Look at the Congo. Before China went in there, it was a war-torn shell. China's rebuilding. China is offering infrastructure in exchange for mining and drilling rights. We let them surpass us in mining and drilling operations, just as we let them surpass us in production of manufactured goods. And now we let them become the only ones with money we can borrow. Meanwhile, while beating us out on the non-renewable resources department, Chinese banks have lent America our bailout and stimulus money with interest. All of this while the Chinese military builds its weapon stores for intimidating Taiwan. Have we forgotten about Taiwan? Have we forgotten Tiananmen? Tibet? How about the unspeakable crimes against Falun Gong? China's persecuting Falun Gong practitioners, martyring them left and right. There's no freedom of religion in Red China. The treatment of Falun Gong practitioners, the work camps, the imprisonment, it looks a lot like treatment of the religious in communist Russia. Remember Siberia? We don't have time to hash out all the efforts of Red China to put down the moralistic and rational people of Falun Gong, but the point here is that by continuing to do business with these socialists in China, our American government is supporting these crimes against humanity and freedom. By playing ball with China instead of sanctioning them, we're normalizing this behavior. But isn't that the point? Normalizing communist China? The Obama is lowering sanctions on Cuba. Don't get me wrong, I like a good cigar, but I like my freedom more. Dominicans are better anyway. I also like the adorable Cuban immigrant kids I used to work with back at the CYO. The first thing they would tell me, in English as well as in Spanish, was, America yes, Fidel no. If the Obama succeeds in normalizing China and Cuba in this country, where will these kids go? Where will the Ukes and Russians and Hungarians go when they come looking for a better life after communism trashed their homelands? Where will they go? Where will the huddled masses yearning to be free go? Where will we go? Folks, we have been a beacon on a hill. We have been a symbol of hope and promise of self-made prosperity. But now our government's narrow-sighted greed has said, let's forgive and forget China's attacks on human rights. And maybe they won't try it here. With us. I remember what was done to the Indians in America, but I like to think that we've grown some since the 1800s. More at least than China has in its history of being one of the oldest and most antisocial societies in the world. Folks, China has put a muzzle on political discourse about Tibet. Yahoo and Google cannot carry anything that deals with questions of China's policy on Tibet. Pelosi, similarly, wants to bring back the fairness doctrine and buy up our papers. Perhaps we're not so different from the Reds after all. Well, while I still can, I'm going upstate to celebrate my religious holiday of Pascha. It's what we call Easter. But fear not. I'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. For all of you who care, I hope you have a lovely Easter or Passover. God bless.